Kia ora everyone, welcome along to this week's coaching call, covering off the mental game, how to stay focused during training and racing. Now this is such a massive topic, and anyone that reached out with some tips or suggestions, I greatly appreciate that. And we'll cover some of that later on. But the main crux of what we're going to cover tonight is looking at mindset shifts and mental toughness tips for everyday athletes. So I'm talking you, me, people that work a regular job, trying to train and race and perform as best as they can, but you're not going to win the Elite World Championships or anything. You might represent in the age group category, which is awesome, and you want to optimize your better than you have previously. So overall, there's going to be a few things we look at: why the mental game matters, understanding a bit about focus, managing self-talk, building mental resilience, staying present in the moment, and some race day strategies to cover off some success, as well as assistant coach Jamie's strategies. And I appreciate your, what do you call it? Not a novel, your ramblings. The big message. And as mentioned in response, I've just literally data dumped it into a couple of slides, and we'll cover that. And I might get you to talk on some of them because there's some really great strategies you've put into that message. Thanks, Jamie. So firstly, why the mental game matters. We put a lot of time and focus into preparing our body physically. We should at least pay lip service to the mental preparation. And the more challenging an event is through either competitiveness, terrain, duration, the more the mental side of it plays an important part, and the less you should play lip service to it, and the more you should put some serious focus on it. So if we were to talk about an Ironman race, now anyone that's done an Ironman or a half Ironman and had a pre-race chat with me, I've probably mentioned the 50-meter rule with you. Now, if you can focus for 50 meters, that's not very far at all. 50 meters focus, deliver that focus and optimize that 50 meters so that you're swimming, cycling, running as best you can for those 50 meters. That's going to be a perfect 50 meters. You just need to do that 4,520 times and you've had the perfect Ironman. And the diligence to back to back to back to back 4,500 anythings is an impressive feat. But having the mindset to focus for those 50 meters is the same principle as focusing for 500 meters or 5 kilometers or 50 kilometers. It just can get a little bit monotonous and the mind can drift. We've all had those moments where we've been out training or racing and we find we're off in la la land and we've solved the world's problems or we've got other solutions. I know Gareth has just joined the call. He not necessarily writes the computer code in his head while he's out training, but I know he's come up with some solutions to some of the problems he's had. I certainly developed some of my better training plans have been developed whilst out on a run or a ride. And I'll often find my mind drifting in other directions other than the focus on the exercise that's happening right now. What sort of things cause those distractions? Just invasive thoughts can be all it is. Or it might be something you're riding along and all of a sudden a dog barks and you can hear it running along behind you somewhere. And that can be a distraction that takes your mind off the effort that you're putting in and potentially lifts the intensity to escape the threat that dog is presenting. Or it might be that you're taking part in quite a long event, might be a miler, some sort of ultra marathon, an Ironman type event, and there's not too many athletes out on the course. And from your point of view, you can't see any other competitors because of the fact that it might be dark for particularly ultra marathons. It might be that the terrain is too up and down and doesn't allow you to see other competitors. It might be that it's twisting and turning through the forest and there might be 50 meters ahead of you, but due to the nature of that terrain, you can't see anyone else. And it can get very lonely out there. So a lot of these things can cause dips in motivation, even nerves as well. If you don't think you're doing very well, that will manifest in your mind and have a negative feedback loop of self-talk. I didn't do enough training. I'm not worthy enough to participate in this event. Those sort of things. And so we're going to cover off how to avoid going in that direction. So understanding the focus and what it takes is quite important. I talked about that 50-meter rule. And if you can execute that 4,520 times in a row, then that is some really fantastic focus. But what do you focus on? Now, there's internal and external focus. Now, internal is where you're focusing on what your heart rate's doing, what your breathing's doing, looking at that. But it might not be in a precise way. You might not be looking at your heart rate and know that it's 164 beats per minute. It might be that you're riding along with no watch at all and go, I can feel that my heart rate is elevated because I'm riding hard up this hill. That's looking at the internal focus. The external focus is when you're targeting something external. And it might be that you, particularly in a tactical race where you're trying to beat another athlete, they are running on your shoulder and you know that they're there. That is an external focus. You're focusing on that cue. You hear them picking up their stride. You feel them move out to overtake and you lift your performance. You lift your speed. It might be towards the end of the event to try and outsprint them, or they're trying to outsprint you. So we've got the different focus and what's driving that focus and your thought processes that are being driven. So concentration in different points of the race is also important. Now, for a long Ironman event, particularly if we look at Ironman and Taupo, you've got that long, gradual descent from the top of the motor racing track all the way out to Reparoa. It's easy to switch off. You're down on the aero bars. You don't need to come out of the aero bars. You're keeping things just ticking along nicely. It's not too intense because it's slightly downhill and you've got a really long day ahead of you still. You don't want to be fully focused in the zone the whole race. What are the key points that you do need to be fully focused for? The start, the transition areas, key turns on both the swim in terms of the swim buoys to turn around, the different intersections and junctions on the race course for both the bike and the run, the aid stations. You want to be focused and concentrating, making sure you do grab that bottle, not knock it out of the volunteer's hand. And you want to be able to get that nutrition. There's all these different key points where focus and concentration is a lot more critical, but it doesn't mean you totally switch off the whole event long. Mental fatigue does have a big impact over long events and long training sessions as well. And part of those long training sessions is preparing your mental fatigue so that you can be a little bit more resilient to it come event day. So, I'm sure a few of you will recognize that gentleman on the screen there. Couple of nods. Grant Fox, arguably one of the greatest All Blacks, particularly of the late 80s and early 90s. Scored many points and I believe was the top point scorer for Test rugby through until the mid-late 90s. Now, he was well known for his ability to place kick a ball and goals. And he had a very deliberate and systematic approach to lining up that kick and delivering it. There's been many occasions, usually in Australia, that whilst he was lining up his place kick, he would get booed constantly. And one of the key things he'd do is pull some grass, breaking it off, and have a handful of grass in his hand, and he would throw that up in the air. And everyone thought that that was him testing the wind direction, so he knew how much force to put on the different part of the ball to allow for enough lead so he can get that ball, slot it between the posts. But that was him throwing away all the negative thoughts, and he just watched those negative thoughts disappear away into the wind, so the only thing left were positive thoughts. He'd blocked out the noise of the crowd, particularly all those partisan Australians not wanting him to score. So there's different tricks we can utilize to help manage your self-talk and keep it positive and keep it focused on the task at hand. The important thing to note is that for you to turn things around into the positive, you need to be able to recognize that they are in the negative, and the ability to reframe those thoughts. If you're running along and think, I can't hold this pace, this is hurting, those negative type thoughts, if you can turn them around, reframe them in a positive way, stay strong and steady is how you can reframe that I can't hold this pace. My one of the mantras that I go to is when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And that's my reminder that if I'm picking up that my thought processes or my self-talk is starting to get negative, I need to reframe that, be a bit tough about it, be a bit staunch, but twist it around and get that mental, positive mental self-talk going, happening back again. So you'll need to come up with your own mantras, some simple songs, lyrics. You don't need to know the whole song, just that one line is often enough, as long as it is a key line and significant for you. During training, it's a perfect opportunity to put these into practice. Find those song lyrics, find something that works for you so that you can keep working through it. Building mental resilience. It's important that we accept that as part of our sport, whether it's an ultra marathon, a triathlon, whatever the event is, there's going to be some discomfort. It's going to be some suffering, and we need to accept that and work through it. Part of working through it is training, preparing our body to handle the lactic acid, preparing our body to tolerate the effort that we're putting in. Particularly for those long events, a miler is a classic example. You can have a goal of a certain time, but at the end of the day, that time is not determined by your ability. It's determined by a whole lot of external factors. The weather on the day. If it's a howling headwind at Challenge Wanaka for half the bike leg, and the other half is all uphill, you're not going to have an amazing bike leg. And so that can play into whether you actually achieve your, I'll say, goal in air quotes, because the goal itself should be focused on an outcome, focused on a process as opposed to the outcome. Especially if it's your first Ironman, your first ultra, the goal should simply be to complete. That way, and other factors don't play into it. I know Jamie used some examples in the slides I've put together based on what he sent through, where all it takes is a slip to come down and block part of the trail, and then that outcome goal is totally destroyed. I touched on before about knowing when to focus in those key points of the race. Visualization and mental rehearsal is important for the race, but also for key training sessions. Now, I know Jamie is quite diligent with going out and training on the course, particularly for any events that are quite local to him, and he can easily travel and do the training on the course. That really helps with the visualization. If you live a long distance away, or even in another country or the opposite side of the world, that visualization can be prepared by watching YouTube or commercial television footage of the event. If you're going to do Hawaii Ironman in Kona for the first time ever, there is lots and lots of video footage online and DVDs available, so you can basically be well familiar with that course. There's also training simulations on platforms like Ruvi that you can use to ride the course. Full Gas is another one with the Ironman courses preloaded, so you can become familiar, and that visualization of the course is a lot more succinct and a lot more realistic, as opposed to sitting down and having a mental rehearsal. You've actually physically can view the footage as you ride it and feel the sensations of what it takes to climb up that hill to Harvey, etc. Now, No build up, no preparation for an event is going to be perfect. There are going to be setbacks. You are going to miss some sessions for whatever reason. It might be work gets in an illness of yourself or of a family member that needs being looked after. So it's important that we take that into account and utilize that opportunity for other training. And that's a good time to include some mental training if you can't get out the door and do physical training. But it's also important to include that in our realistic appraisal of what we want to achieve and modifying those goals as the preparation moves forward. And it might be that you modify your goals as a step down from what you had initially thought, but you might also use it as a modification, as a step up if training is going well and moving towards things a lot more successfully than initially envisaged. So staying present in the moment. There's a few things we can utilize here, but using some principles of mindfulness and also breathing. Breathing is important as endurance athletes. The more air we get into our lungs, the more oxygen we can deliver to the muscles. And if those muscles need that oxygen, we will be utilizing it. So the mindfulness side of things is staying calm, staying present in the moment so that we can take opportunities. It might be that the downhill section, and this is a photo of Jess at the Auckland Half Marathon. You've got the downhill as you're coming down the bridge and winding down, and you end up going underneath the bridge. That downhill portion is a good opportunity for you to utilize that, increase your pace without increasing the effort. One of the bullet points there is control the controller, or controllables versus uncontrollables. And a saying around that is to control the controllables and not worry about the rest. You can control the training you get out and do. You can control the effort you put into your training. You can control the effort you put into your race. You can't control what other athletes are doing training wise. You can't control how fast someone else starts the race. They might be starting too fast. Focus on your race and not other people's, and stick within your goals and your abilities, and don't worry about those other people and what they are doing. So some tips for race day success. Now I have a self-psych form or various forms of it for triathlon, for Ironman, for marathons, for general running races, whole range of things. And I encourage you to print or download it, and I'll have the links in the description. For those on the live call, I'll put those links into the VIP group later on. Download that form, print it out, physically sit down 1 to 2 nights before your event, 20-30 minutes quiet time to physically write your answers to each question within the form. That will help set some expectations. It'll help you develop your race plan. It'll help you come up with solutions to the what if scenarios. What if this goes wrong? How am I going to handle it? What if this happens? What will I do then? Examples for cyclists is what happens if I get a puncture? For runners, what am I going to do if I get blisters? If it's early in the race, is that going to be different from if it's at mile 92 of a miler? It helps you plan how you will handle it. It also helps you manage your nerves and adrenaline leading up to the event. Once you're in the race, having everything solidified in your head is really great, because that's what the self-psych form is there to do. Getting into the race on the morning, you've already visualized all those key points of the race. You've got your mantras or affirmations, and you've got what you do to keep calm. It might be focusing on your breathing. A big deep breath in through the nose, exhale through the mouth. It might be you envisage that your drink bottle has got something that will calm you down. Just take a sip, and that process of taking that sip is part of that calming. One thing, Steve Gurney, for those that are familiar with him, a legendary, iconic New Zealand multisporter, as part of his pre-race mental routines, he used to create some, what's the word, a ruse basically, and try and psych his other athletes out. At 1 year at Coast to Coast, he was busy painting this green stuff on his kayak, and that drew the attention of other athletes. What's that you've got, Steve? And he explained how it was this special proprietary liquid that he had developed that was going to make his kayak slip through the water a whole lot faster and easier. It was just Palmolive dishwashing detergent. Um, but the other athletes didn't know that. And Steve Gurney was well known as an engineer and did everything to try and make everything quicker. But all of a sudden, everyone believed that Steve Gurney had this magic secret potion that made his kayak faster in the water. And it wasn't an engine. So those mind games were always working. Once again, drawing back to particularly long events and that 50-meter rule, it's important to stay mentally engaged during events, particularly in those key or tough moments, the start line, the key turning or intersections, so that you stay on course, the aid stations, the transitions from one discipline to the next. Similar with an ultra marathon, getting into those aid stations where you can pick up your extra supplies, topping everything up. It's important that you get in and get back out quickly. The more time you spend standing around those locations, the more time you spend standing around. The more time you spend out on the course moving forward, the more time you spend moving towards the finish line. But just going back to that 50-meter rule, it might be as you're coming into the aid station for particularly an ultra marathon, it might be that to optimize that next 50 meters, you're actually thinking further afield, not just how fast can I move through the next 50 meters. It might be what actions can I take in the next 50 meters that will set me up for success later on. And that might be topping up my drink bottles, topping up my bladder, resupplying with food and fuel to take out on the course. So don't just think faster is better, but optimizing things for the long term. And then finally, after the successful completion of the event or not successful completion, have a bit of post-race reflection using lessons to help strengthen what you can do better, both physically and mentally. And I've also got a debrief form that you can download, and I'll include a link to that later on. But if you're watching this on YouTube, that will be in the description as well. So what I'll do is I'll cover off on Jamie's strategies that he sent through to me, and then I'll get him to expand on some of them. And if someone has any, or anyone have specific questions in relation to that, then I might get Jamie to answer them, as well as throw in my 2 cents worth. And Jamie comes from a strong military background, and I really like how these have got the twist on, particularly time spent in reconnaissance is seldom wasted. It's a key catchphrase for any soldier, and that applies equally as much to an endurance athlete, particularly on long, challenging courses. And Jamie is an ultra marathon runner. That time out in the terrain that he's going to be competing in is very important. But even if you're doing an Ironman event, which is fully on the road, with the exception obviously for the swim, time spent doing a reconnaissance on that course is never wasted as well. It might be you don't have the opportunity to train on that course, but if you're traveling to get to the event, when you get to that destination, even time spent just driving the bike course, driving the run course, and getting that eyes on the terrain, eyes on where the aid stations are going to be, getting that familiarity is going to be very important. I'm just going to read what Jamie sent through. If you can get on the area you'll be running, cycling, swimming ahead of the event, you'll get a better idea of what to expect. If you can't do all of it due to distance/land access, try and do the parts that you think will give the most trouble. If there's a profile, study it and work out the technical areas, all those points that aren't that you're not as strong in, and plan how you're going to attack it. No one likes a surprise hill climb 3 kilometers from the finish. The next one there is talking around the visualization side of things, those key sections that I've already touched on. And Jamie wrote, using the physical and virtual recce's, visualize yourself swimming, cycling, running sections. What do you see? How do you feel? How much effort are you putting in? Make being there feel normal. The next one there, train in all conditions at different times of the day. Now, as an ultra marathon, particularly for those longer events, the milers, as opposed to the 50-something K events, you are going to be out during the hours of darkness. The backyard ultras, you are going to be running in the hours of darkness if you're pushing through. And it's important to get exposure out in those environments, what it's like in the hours of darkness. It's totally different, especially on a trail. Some of you might know Diane Chesma, who I coached to many ultra cycling events. She did 1,000 kilometers, 10 laps of grape ride. She also did 4 laps around Lake Taupo as part of those events about 10, 15 years ago. A lot of her training sessions, we would start at 2 in the morning and covering 200, 300, 400 kilometer training rides just so she got exposure to the hours of darkness and then got the benefit of finishing during the hours of daylight and then going to bed at a regular time, as opposed to starting in the hours of daylight and riding through into darkness and having things mixed up in terms of body clock in the other direction. It doesn't just apply to time of the day, it applies to weather conditions. If you think, oh, there's some clouds in the sky, it might rain, yeah, no, I'm not going to go for a run outside today. If you have to run in the rain, you're not going to be prepared for it. You're not going to be mentally resilient when the challenging conditions environmentally kick in. Whereas if you're always running in the rain, it's just water off a duck's back. I'm almost disappointed Jamie didn't have in his notes here, train hard, fight easy, which is another military saying that refers to the fact your training should be more challenging and harder than the battle conditions that you're expecting to experience. If you've trained at that higher level, everything else is going to be easy. Jamie's words here are train in all conditions at different times of the day. If you're out there for hours, the weather will likely change. If you're doing longer endurance events, you will operate in darkness. Training in these conditions is getting your body and brain used to it, the same as we train the body through repetitions of exercise. And the last one I've got on the slide is, what's the most dangerous thing? Sorry, I've jumped one. What is the most likely thing that can go wrong on the day? So if you're just running a local park run, there's not too much wrong that could happen. It might be that you take a wrong turn and end up having to double back. But if you're out there doing an ultra marathon, are the blisters going to be the worst thing that happens to you that day? What about chafing other parts of the body? What about running out of fuel or getting to an aid station and all the athletes that have gone before you have actually depleted all the supplies that are there? All these sort of things can be pretty catastrophic if they build up enough. So what is the worst thing? What is the most likely thing that could go wrong on that day? Then hand in hand is, what is the most dangerous thing that could also affect you on that day if it was to happen? So Jamie's comments on this, what is the most likely thing that can go wrong on the day? Blisters, chafing, puncture, etc. So what do you need to do to defeat it so that it's only a blip, but not a dead stop? So it's not going to end your day prematurely and have to DNF. And then what is the most dangerous thing that can affect you on the day? You won't be able to stop the effects, but you can lessen them. The weather, getting lost, or equipment issues. And then they both lead into what is the most likely and most dangerous playthrough, what will happen, and then what can you do about it and what the subsequent effect is. This is planning ahead. This is what's known as the military appreciation process. that Jamie would have gone through many times in his career to plan out and make sure everything goes smoothly. But once the operation starts, we can pretty much guarantee that it's not going to go perfectly and something is going to go wrong, which means the plan needs to be flexible and change. And this is thinking about what can cause that plan to change and how do we mitigate it so that we can continue running towards our destination, we continue cycling, we continue swimming, so that the whole day doesn't end up with those 3 letters against our name in the result sheets of a DNF, or even worse, arguably a DNS. So Jamie's comments here is using the most likely and most dangerous, play through what will happen, what you can do about it, and what the subsequent effect is. The more you work through the oh shit stuff, the better you are to deal with it and the less likely to withdraw. And that's where the self-psych form comes in. You're planning through, you're taking those steps to consider those and have a plan in place if they were to happen. Now, I'm not going to name an athlete, but I had an athlete at a significant half marathon earlier on in the year. They left their running shoes in their accommodation. That is, I call it a what if moment. Jamie calls it an oh shit moment. But there was a plan in place for that. It was a significant event. That was a deal breaker. There was a plan in place. The shoes got fetched and delivered. They were able to complete their warm-up and run the event very successfully. At the end of the day, it was only a minor blip. The warm-up was slightly delayed in starting. Full warm-up was still achieved. Ready to start, on time, on the start line, good position, and a good result at the end of the day. Although it was a break from the perfect plan. I see you've just unmuted there, Jamie.
Oh, have I? Cool. I was going to give you abuse for using that photo.
Oh, yeah, I meant to actually comment. You might not recognize this person running in the photo. It's from a few moons ago when he was clean shaven, and it's been a few moons since he's been clean shaven. So moving on to the next one, positive self-reinforcement. I've put that in there twice, not necessarily because it's so important. I've just must have hit paste twice inadvertently. So this is where you read good things to yourself during the event. Nothing's going to go perfectly, particularly for those longer events. And so when things do go well, it's important that you recognize it and you can use that as positive reinforcement as opposed to negative reinforcement where you focus on everything that has gone wrong. Allow yourself to reward yourself, give yourself a pat on the back, an extra jelly bean, whatever the case is, a shot of goo, to acknowledge the fact that you've just ran up that hill really quickly. You've just delivered an appropriate amount of power without redlining it on that section of the course, whatever the case might be. Jamie's comments that he wrote, celebrate small victories on the day and if needed, reward yourself, e.g. doing a long ascent on rocky terrain. Pick a marker and when you get to it, congratulate yourself. Thank your legs for playing the game. Have a drink or a jelly bean, whatever works for you. Now, this isn't necessarily an example of positive self-reinforcement. It's actually lying to yourself. Tanya will be familiar with the course of the Gisborne Herald Triathlon. Did you ever do that back in the day? She's nodding. The run route was to the top of Kitey Hill, the most prominent hill in Gisborne. And it's a tough climb. It's a tough run up the top of that hill. My legs were fried. The bike leg has a couple of decent hills on it that you ride twice. And my legs were fried on the run and I did not want to walk. I told myself and I told my legs that when I got to the top of the hill, I'll allow them to walk, but they had to get to the top of the hill first to be allowed that walk. Ran all the way to the top. When I got to the top, my mind wasn't necessarily in optimal performance at that point. My mind laughed at my legs and said, ha, 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 tricked you, just lied to you. Now you've got to run all the way to the finish line to earn that walk. And although not a case of a reward, it was a case of tricking through mindset and tricking those legs. Well, I'm almost disassociating my legs from my mind. They are very obviously connected, but I allowed myself to trick them. My mind knew it was going to lie to those legs. My legs probably knew it was happening too, but I managed to keep running and keep the run moving reasonably quickly. I think I did 44 minutes that day for the 10Ks, which, when you consider the hill, is reasonably sharp. And the last point there, actually, I've missed one of Jamie's points out. Know when to call it a day. Sometimes things do go bad, and pushing through, just being stubborn, being mutton, and just pushing through regardless is not always the best solution. Have the presence of mind to make wise decisions. And Jamie's comments here, know when to call it a day. There's a difference between being resilient and pushing through versus being stubborn and causing long-term damage to self and also possibly putting others at risk. No one likes to DNF, but it takes a strong brain to call it when it's right. And then the last one there, every session is going to be different. Even if it's the same workout interval or course that you've ran or cycled a million times, each time is going to be slightly different. The weather's going to be different. The wind's going to be blowing a different direction. Your coffee before the workout is going to stimulate different physiological systems in a different way. Every session gives you learning opportunities. So take those opportunities rather than getting, oh, this is just the dumb old session that I've done every other week. It's the process of going through and what you learn from each session. And so Jamie's comments, no two swim, cycle, runs are the same. Even if it's a repeat of a training route or event, there is always a subtle difference or a bigger one, such as a change of route caused by slips. Don't expect everything to be the same, so maintain flexibility of mind to help transition to the new reality. So when you recognize that something's different, just accept it and move on and adapt as you need to. I'll let you open up and comment on either of these two slides, Jamie, and talk a bit more detail about ones that you think are a bit more important.
Cool. Cheers, Ray. Well, firstly, it was good to see what I've put to you was pretty much exactly what you'd said in the first part of it, so I can't be too far off the mark. The reconnaissance one, that's for me. There's a few events I can't get to until it's time for the run, but somebody's done it. Look at Strava. There's files out out there. See how undulating it is. Google Earth. That's another one that I use, especially for those stretches of land that you can't get to, or if it is a new event. Just try and learn as much as I can, and try and sectionalize it. We were talking about mantras. My one is I'm there to complete, not compete. I am a competitive person and I want to do the best that I can. Different if it's one of the team is expecting the podium, then it's a different mind shift again. But for me, it's the old, well, it's part of that start line mentality of reining myself in so that I'm not charging out over the start line like a bull out the gate, to get that consistency throughout rather than gassing it at the beginning and then I become physically fatigued faster, which then makes me more mentally fatigued faster. The visualization piece, not even arguably, but one of the best football players of all time, Edson Arantes do Nascimento, better known as Pele, he would sit down for 90 minutes before a game and he would work out exactly where he was going to be during that game, what he would have to do. And it's just that I'm not quite that into it, but just that visualization piece, what will go well, what could go wrong, just how do you get through that so that you're then not having to think about it at the time, so you're saving yourself minutes when those things go that way. Yes, pretty much. It's my key ones. You've
Just
pretty much covered it.
hand in hand with that, I used Grant Fox as an example earlier. He was a great one for his mental preparation before an event, before a game, sorry. And a totally different sport. Wayne Gretzky, arguably the world's greatest ice hockey player, known as the Great One. He had a similar philosophy in terms of spending time mentally preparing, thinking about the game, where he needed to be positioned. One of his most famous sayings was along the lines, and I'm not going to get this right because I'm not an ice hockey person, is it's not where you need to be seen, it's where you need to be to receive the puck. So you don't want to be in a position for the puck to come to you. You need to move to where the puck is going. And so that preparation and his mindset around that set him apart from his peers during particularly the 80s. Any questions popping up from that? Jason's shaking his head, so we'll move down the screen to Tanya. I know, Jamie, you've just had some words, but any questions around what was presented before your contribution? And thanks for sending all those through. That was greatly appreciated. Gareth.
No questions from me tonight.
Okay, no worries. I'll open things up. Actually, I'll just say there's a chat box there. Yep, that was covered. Background for questions about anything training related, how's everyone's training going, etc. Jason, thumbs up from you. Tanya, Jamie.
Ties back into what this whole one's been about. The resilience when things are not going right. So obviously you're aware of what's going on with me. So for everybody else, I've a specialist appointment on Friday there. So I've torn my meniscus, which makes running a little bit more challenging, as in I won't be doing it until I've had the surgery. But I won't see the surgeon until sometime in this 10th of December. So it's just what do I do to maintain myself and my happy factor? Because as Ray knows, I hate static equipment. I hate spin bikes. I only learned to do breaststroke when I was a kid, so the frog kick doesn't really work well with the bung knee. So that's part of Ray's challenge, to come up with my training schedule so that I don't keep putting on the kgs, but I maintain that aerobic fitness and just being able to do stuff, but actually still mostly enjoy doing it.
Jamie,
And I will make it.
I tore my meniscus in my right knee in May last year, and I had 9 months off running. Lucky though, I do enjoy cycling and swimming, and so was able to do that. Did a lot of strength work and followed what the physio said exactly. I was kind of lucky in that by the time I had all the scans and investigative kind of stuff, they said it was a small tear without a flap. So I'm assuming you're having surgery because yours is a larger tear with a flap or something like that, which, yeah, I was just really lucky. And I'm doing the Coastal 5, 5 runs over a weekend next weekend. I honestly thought I'd never run again. But, here I am. I'm not completely pain-free. I've got to really watch what I do with that knee, but hopefully you'll come back. In the meantime, I don't know. I don't know what to suggest when you haven't got running and when you haven't got swimming and cycling to kind of fall back on. But yeah, I did do a lot of strength work over that time too.
Cheers.
I feel for you.
Um, I I've pulled out of one event, which is January, which was a backyard ultra that I was doing again, but I will be running 60k at the end of March. That's pretty much a non-negotiable. Um, it does look like it's it will be a partial one, not the full gig, because I went in and said to the the specialist, we're doing surgery, aren't we? He's like, well, that's a discussion if you want to see the surgeon. I'm like, don't fear the scalpel. Let's just get it done so that I'm not mucking around. Didn't come here to fornicate with spiders, as the Australians would say.
Cool.
Yeah, and meniscectomy, as it's called, basically a tightening up of the meniscus. It's easy to recover from if you follow the physio and rehab specialist advice. Jamie's lucky; he's got a fantastic physio who's got a fantastic name. He's got Coach Ray and Physio Ray, just two different people. One's better looking than the other significantly. I've had both knees tidied up as a result. I ran marathons 10 weeks and 6 weeks after them respectively. So return to running can be quick if you start or the lead into the surgery, you're starting from a place of good aerobic fitness and good structural knee strength, obviously with the tear in the meniscus. Once that's been tidied up, then you can continue on. If I knew Jamie was going to talk about this on the call, I think, yeah, they're just a little bit out of reach. Both my meniscus or menisci, because it's plural, and 2 little bottles. I could share them with you tonight, but I'll save that for another day. Gareth, anything from you?
No, nothing. I've just been a bit sick the last, well, probably month. So this has been a pretty big training week for me. I'm still sick, but I'm managing it. So
Yeah.
we'll just keep on keeping on, I guess. I know my event is looming ever closer, and I'm feeling a little bit beaten down from being sick all the time. Just I'd like to be not sick now so I can train properly, because yeah, the event is hanging over me. But that's all that's going through my head at the moment.
Yep. So 15 weeks out, you've got plenty of time to not necessarily catch back up, but to fully recover and get plenty of quality training completed. So don't stress too much about that. I think it's 15 weeks. So we're all moving towards something, and I will be seeing you down there moving towards that as well. So any final comments, questions? If not, we'll wrap things up. Jamie, don't forget to book in, make that appointment, jump online, book that slot now before there are no opportunities until mid-December. Thanks for joining me on the call tonight. A special thanks to Jamie for his significant contribution tonight. It made preparing the slides for this easy. Just cut and paste, dump it in and find a couple of old photos. Thanks again, everyone. Ka kite anō. Have a fantastic evening, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next coaching call, if not on a Velocity Life in the near future.
Thanks, Ray.
Thanks, Ray. See you later.
See you guys.
You're welcome, team.